Let's dive into a huge puzzle in the global economy right now, one that has economists like Raghuram Rajan seriously concerned. On one hand, you look around and the world is just full of uncertainty. But on the other hand, financial markets, they're acting like the party is never going to end. So what on earth is going on?
I mean, just look at this contrast. In the real world, we've got geopolitical risk, trade wars, messy politics, and real worries about inflation. You'd think people would be cautious, right? But then you look at the financial world and it's a completely different story. Stock prices are sky high. Credit spreads are razor thin, which means investors are pricing in almost no risk. And speculative stuff, from crypto to gold, is just on fire. It's a total disconnect.
So that brings us to the big question. With so many red flags waving, why are financial markets popping champagne corks? To figure that out, we actually need to look at what history and some really crucial academic research can tell us. Rajan points to this fascinating study of 154 business cycles across 14 different countries. And what these researchers wanted to know is pretty simple. What makes some recessions so much more painful than others? And what they found was a very, very clear pattern, a worrying one.
This chart basically sums it all up. Your average run-of-the-mill recession is usually a quick dip and a quick recovery, okay? Now, a recession that's kicked off by a financial crisis, that's way deeper and it lasts a lot longer. But here's the key, that third bar. The absolute worst outcomes, the really catastrophic downturns, happen after a massive expansion of credit. The more debt a system piles on before things go wrong, the harder and more painful the fall.
And this link between credit booms and epic busts, it's not a coincidence. It's actually driven by a pretty predictable cycle that economists call the U-shape of monetary policy. You can think of it as a two-act play that kind of sets the stage for disaster.
So the cycle begins on the downslope of that U. Central banks make money cheap and easy by cutting interest rates. And this, of course, fuels a huge credit boom and blows up asset bubbles. These are the good times, right? But then comes the upslope. To cool things down or fight inflation, they start raising rates. The problem is, the whole system is now addicted to that cheap credit, and the minute it's taken away, the whole thing collapses. The seeds of the bust are always planted in the boom.
And that's really the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? It's so easy to look back after a crash and say, well, the risks were obvious. But in the moment, very smart, very rational people get completely swept up in the mania. And the reason why has a lot to do with plain old human psychology. So the first driver is something called the search for yield. Just think about it for a second. If you're managing a pension fund and a super safe government bond that used to pay you 5% now only pays 1%, you can't meet your obligations. So you're forced to go looking for returns somewhere else, to take on more risk in junk bonds or speculative stocks just to get the income you need. It's not crazy, it's a logical response to the low-rate world you're living in. But that logical decision then gets supercharged by something way more emotional, a force that can make even the most careful, by-the-book investors just toss their plans right out the window. You know what I'm talking about, financial FOMO, the fear of missing out. When you see everybody around you making a killing, when your competitors are posting record profits, the pressure to just jump in becomes immense. You might have a gut feeling that it's risky. You might even think the end is coming. But that fear of being the only one left on the sidelines, it can be just overwhelming.
I mean, this quote from the CEO of Citigroup just before the 2008 meltdown says it all. He basically admitted that he knew the party was going to end badly but felt like he had no choice but to keep dancing. If he'd pulled back, all his star bankers would have just gone to a competitor who was still dancing. It's an incredible admission.
Okay, so we've got the search for yield and we've got FOMO. But since 2008, this whole dynamic has been put on steroids. It's not just about interest rates anymore. Central banks have a much more direct, much more powerful tool for pumping cash into the system. It's called quantitative easing, or just QE. In simple terms, this is when a central bank basically creates money out of thin air and uses it to buy up bonds and other assets. The whole point is to pour liquidity, raw cash, directly into the veins of the financial system. And the scale of this is just mind-boggling.
To really wrap your head around this, just look at the numbers. Before the 2008 crisis, the entire U.S. banking system operated with about $80 billion in reserves. That was considered plenty for everything to run smoothly.
And today, that number is around $3 trillion. Let that sink in. From 80 billion to 3 trillion. That's not just turning on a spigot, that's diverting an entire ocean. The system is absolutely swimming in an amount of cash that is completely unprecedented in history.
But here is the trap that Rajan warns about. Liquidity is like a drug. The more the system gets,
the more it adapts to it, and the more it finds ways to use it. Banks take on more risk. They fund more speculative ventures. The whole system becomes dependent on it. That $80 billion that was enough back in 2008, it wouldn't even be a drop in the bucket today. The system now needs trillions just to feel normal.
So the obvious question is, well, so what? If things get a little wobbly, can't the central bank just come in and save the day like they always do? Well, yeah, they can. But this is where the problem gets even deeper. The way they rescue the system is actually making it more fragile over time.
You see, the classic rulebook for stopping a financial panic, written over a century ago by Walter Bagehot, said a central bank should lend freely, but only to good companies against good collateral, and, this is the most important part, at a high penalty interest rate. That high price makes sure no one gets reckless. But today, we lend freely to pretty much everyone, sometimes against junk collateral, and always at a low, subsidized price.
And the consequence of these cheap rescues is a really dangerous feedback loop. It creates what economists call moral hazard. It's this idea that you can take insane risks because you know that if you blow up, you'll get bailed out without any real pain. It literally rewards the exact behavior that caused the crisis in the first place, and it means saving the system today just plants the seeds for an even bigger crisis down the road.
So all of this brings us right back to where we started. We've seen the dangerous U-shaped pattern in history. We get the psychology behind the search for yield and FOMO, and now we know that modern tools like QE and cheap bailouts have just thrown gasoline on that fire.
So when economists look at today's euphoric markets with asset prices through the roof and constant pressure on central banks to cut rates and make money even cheaper, they ask a really uncomfortable question. Are we right here, at the very, very beginning of that downslope on the next U-shaped curve? Are we, right now, building up the massive credit boom that will fuel the next crisis?
We've seen this movie before. Easy money, a desperate search for returns, and a fear of missing out. The question we all have to ask ourselves as we look at these booming markets is a simple one. Are we hearing that music start to play all over again?